you mentioned before, right at the start, that you're realizing with how many kids you've got, with your role, like we said, you run a women's ministry, you co-lead a church, you've got a lot going on, that you've learned that life isn't like boxed, but it's like a weave. You use the word weave, like it's just all blends. Would you just speak into that? Because I know from my personality type, I really like everything I like my boxes, I like my ducks in a row. And actually sometimes, I know seeing the girls here, I've spoken to some of them, actually that concept of just kind of not going with the flow, but do you know what I mean? Like life ebbing and flowing can feel unsettling, like, I'm not in control. How do you do that and just make peace with this is how it is?
I think I would say in our lives, like Tim and I, our life, we have boundaries, but we don't have hard and fast rules. Does that make sense? And I think that's the difference. Again, the self-awareness thing, I love to be in control. So I love the boxes. I like neat and tidy, but my goodness, life is just not neat and tidy. And so again, I would say, I'm not leveling this at you, by the way, personally, but I know for me, sometimes God's like, you just have to surrender your control, surrender the boxes. But I think what I'm not saying is throw the boundaries out. And so Tim and one of our boundary lines, for example, is between, and it's changed a bit over the seasons because now our kids do a slightly longer school day, and our little one is really little. So, it doesn't quite affect her in the same way. But really up until about 3 months ago, Tim and my day always finished at 4:00. And so 4 till 7:30 or 8:00, those 4 hours were just like non-negotiable family time. We never scheduled meetings at that time. We didn't take work calls at that time. We didn't do emails at that time. And that was just sacred family time. And I would say that was almost close to a hard and fast rule, but it was certainly a boundary line. And yet there were always going to be occasions. And when I say like occasions, rare occasions where something would happen, you'd have to be a bit flexible. So I think the way that we work it is that we have boundaries around family, particularly. So again, Saturdays would be family day, but there are going to be times where a ministry trip or something comes in and you have to adjust. Tim and I, we have a day off on a Monday. That's a boundary line. And like our assistant knows, you don't put anything on a Monday. That's a boundary line. And yet you have to be flexible because there are going to be times where you might have to just shift it around a bit and change. So I'd say it's the way that we work it is there are boundaries, but there's flexibility within the boundaries. I think the other thing is, I think when what you do as a calling, it's never 9 to 5. I'm just saying that out loud and I'm questioning whether I actually believe that. That could be, I'm going to say in my experience, for me anyway, because actually if you're called to be a doctor or a midwife, then you probably have got set hours and it might well be 9 to 5. So just ignore that statement. That's probably not very helpful. What I mean is, if you're called to something, you don't clock on and clock off. It's part of who you are. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so I think boundaries are key, but if you're called to something, you just have to be flexible because the Holy Spirit may ask you to step into something. And if it's like, well, it's out of my rules, it's out of my boxes, then it doesn't really work like that. And I think one thing on that, I remember Tim heard this talk and I've subsequently listened to it, a guy in America, pastor in America, and he has this talk called Cheat the Church. And actually, to be honest, the rules in America are very different. The church pastors in America work crazy hours, like 60, 70 hours a week, something like that. That's like the norm. That's not, we're just not going to do that. Like, we want to hang out with our children. We're not going to. But nevertheless, church can seep into every part and you can feel this, the job is never done, and that is the problem with a calling. That's the other thing, is when you're called to something, the job is never done. So annoying. It's never done. Especially if you're I'm a completer finisher. So I'm like, I like the job to be done. But he said it, but basically his story is he got to a point where his wife was like, and again, in America, the roles are a bit different. It's, from what I've seen, it's very much the guy is the pastor and the wife is the homemaker. And for some people, that's absolutely right. That if that's what you're called to, brilliant, do it diligently. That's not who we are. Tim and I are both, it's enmeshed. And that's probably why our lives are more enmeshed, because we're both equally called to lead the church. So it makes it slightly more challenging. And actually, probably when you add our 2 hours together, it probably does come to more like, the American pastor role. But he said, if you're ever in doubt, you're having to choose between the church or your family, cheat the church. Never cheat the family, cheat the church.